Good evening. On behalf of the commissioners and staff, I would like to welcome you to the October 26, 2021 City of Roseville Public Utilities Commission meeting. This 7-member commission is responsible for studying and advising the City Council regarding all utilities owned or operated by the city, including electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste. The Public Utilities Commission advises the City Council regarding planning, rates, public information, cable television franchises, and other matters relating to such enterprises, and may also hear citizen complaints as to operation or rates. The Public Utilities Commission also advises the City Council regarding the activities of such joint power agencies as the city may be a member or which relate to such utility enterprises. At this time, I would like to ask everyone, please put your electronic devices on silent. Lynn, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Bilski?
Present.
Commissioner DeLacy?
Present.
Commissioner DeMarkey?
Present.
Commissioner Granger?
Here.
Commissioner Knox?
Here.
Commissioner Meisch?
Here.
And Chair Webb.
Here. Commissioner Knox, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 4 on the agenda is public comments. This item is for anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that's not on tonight's agenda. When addressing the commission, please state your first and last name for the record. There doesn't appear to be any public comment tonight. I'd like to move to the next item. Item 5 on the agenda is the approval of the September 28th meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
And would anyone like to second the motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstentions? Motion passes. Our next item is requests and presentations. We will be having Sean Macham, our Assistant Director, doing our presentation tonight.
Yes, good evening, Chair Webb and members of the Commission. Sean Macham, Assistant Director with Roseville Electric Utility. I'm filling in for Michelle tonight, and I'll provide an update on notable items at the Electric Department. I have 3 items I just wanted to brief the Commission on. And the first one is really a follow-up item to an action that we took to this commission at its last meeting, and that is an update on our electric rate proposal. As you recall, we brought a presentation to this commission last meeting after quite a bit of public outreach, and received a recommendation from this commission to advance to our City Council the rate proposal for City Council approval. We did go to City Council last week at their October 20th meeting with that electric rate proposal. The City Council did approve the rate proposal, and as part of the presentation and the discussion following the presentation, the council was very pleased with the amount of outreach that we undertook with the community. We're very appreciative of the customer programs that we've advanced over the last year and a half with our customers and our community. And overall, just general supportive and appreciative of the work that Electric did to advance this rate proposal, and also the recommendation from this commission. And so with that approval, that marks the first step in the City Council's approval of the rates. There will be a second reading of the electric rates in accordance with the municipal code next week at their council meeting. And then, as you may recall, the electric rates are scheduled to go in effect on January of 2022 as the first tranche, and January of 2023 as the second tranche. You'll recall that was a 2-year implementation. So just wanted to circle back with the commission on that item, as it was a meaningful discussion here and a meaningful initiative for us at the electric utility. So it's on its way for further approval. The second thing I want to note for the commission is just to provide a brief update on events related to the storm and our system over the past weekend, and how it affected our overall electric system, our grid, and the impacts from the storm in terms of outages. I just want to say the thing I'd like to note is we fared very well. Sunday we did have a couple outages that our crews were working with. We had a tree versus equipment pole and conductor at one part of town yesterday, Sunday, and then we had a vehicle versus equipment on Sunday as well. And as you probably are aware, very tough conditions, weather conditions on Saturday or Sunday, and but overall not too adversely impacted. We had 41 customers that were impacted by outages. I will say we've had a couple crews out in very bad weather on Sunday, and they did a great job to bring service back to those customers that were impacted Sunday mid-morning and afternoon. So overall, we held up very well in light of the conditions that everyone saw over the weekend. And then the last thing I just want to note, and I think our director did provide an email to the commission here recently on this, but since this commission last met in September, our electric utility director, Michelle Bertolino, announced her retirement, planning that at the end of the year this year. Michelle, you all know, Michelle has been at the helm of Roseville Electric and our director for over 11 years. And she has been a tremendous value to the city, to our electric department. And we stand in such a great position as an electric utility in this community with our strong financial position that she's put us in, the strong brand trust that our utility has in the community with our industry peers, our high service levels we provide in the community, and then the team that has been built over the utility over the past 11 years. And she'll be missed. We're very excited for her and what retirement may have in store for her. But I just wanted to note that here to this commission. There was a press release and there was some other information that went out to our customers through our newsletters and on social media. But she served us well, she served the community well, and we're very excited for her in what's in store for retirement. The city is going to be starting a process for a recruiting process to fill her position here very soon, and expect to have a recruitment and a new director in hopefully by the end of the year. So I wanted to note that. I think that's very important for everyone to understand, the commission and our community and customers. And so with that, I'll stop. Those were just the 3 items that I wanted to mention as part of the electric utility department update. I can answer any questions anyone may have.
I have a comment. I got a call from my daughter. She lives in San Jose, and they've had some big power outages. And I said, how do you guys do it? How have you avoided it? You get these low rates and you're right down. He said, that's Michelle, you, your staff, and it's incredible. You guys have done really an incredible job and deserve a lot of credit. Just good management. Yeah,
appreciate it, and we'll pass it on to the team. We've got a great team and great folks doing work in the community.
Any other questions from the side? Over here? Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission? Given there's no public comment, thank you for your update, Sean. Our next item is the legislative regulatory update. If we could move to that agenda item.
Good evening, Chair Webb and Commissioners. I am Amber Blix, the Utility Government Relations Administrator with the Electric Utility. Today I'm going to be giving you guys a brief overview of kind of the legislative and regulatory events that transpired over the course of this year. I'd like to talk about some of our regulatory advocacy efforts and some of the significant energy issues in 2021, including the Governor's Executive Proclamation that was issued in July of this year, as well as the California Arrearage Payment Program, also known as CAP, which arose out of the state budget process this year. And then we'll touch upon some key state legislation regarding what passed and what failed that we were involved in. So just to start, some of our legislative and regulatory advocacy efforts. This is a real priority for the city and our department. In 2021, we tracked over 150 state and federal bills in the electric department. Annually, we develop a legislative platform that guides our advocacy efforts throughout the year. So we'll be doing that and working on that shortly here to guide our advocacy efforts next year. And then we also have dedicated resources, staff, and lobbyists to ensure that our business interests are covered at the state and federal levels. We also work very closely with our trade associations to shape legislation, and those are the Northern California Power Agency, or NCPA, the California Municipal Utilities Association, or CMUA, and then also the American Public Power Association, or APPA, and that's at the federal level. So diving right in, one of the significant energy issues in 2021 came out of the executive branch this year, and this was the governor's executive proclamation declaring a state of emergency, and that was issued on July 30th of 2021. And it really called us to look at demand and supply side measures that would mitigate potential capacity and energy shortages. So there was two components of that. On the demand side, it called for incentives for large energy users to reduce electric demand when an extreme heat event or a loss of transmission or both occurred. And this was really geared towards the state's largest utilities who were kind of already set up to respond to those kind of demand events. On the supply side, it really encouraged new contracts to expand energy supply and storage. And this was something that Roseville was actively engaged in this year with the state government, particularly the Department of Water Resources, to temporarily locate 2 mobile generating units at the Roseville Energy Park. And this generation will be used to support the state's electricity grid, with Roseville having the option to purchase the units in the future. And I know that the commission has been briefed on this in the past, but I just wanted to touch upon that as part of one of the issues that came out of the executive branch this year as part of the legislative process. One of the other really big positive issues that came out of this year's legislative process was the CAP program, the California Arrearage Payment Program, which was a $1 billion legislative package for COVID-19 electric and gas arrears. And specifically, $300 million was dedicated to publicly owned utilities out of that funding. And this program is going to be administered by the California Department of Community Services and Development, and applies to arrears that accumulated from March 4th of 2020 to June 15th of 2021. So there's a specific time frame there that this funding will apply to. We know already that the statewide need exceeds that available $1 billion legislative funding. And when we initially submitted our survey to CSD as part of this process, Roseville's arrears were at $1.37 million. Those have been significantly reduced since this process has been going on, and many of our folks are on payment plans, but that was where we were at the beginning of this process. And City Council just recently approved a resolution to participate in this program and accept and expend CAP funds. And we expect that as this program progresses and we continue to be involved, that we will be able to get out bill credits to our customers in the early 2022. So that's a process that's ongoing and a really positive outcome, and actually quite a big lift in the legislature this year that we're really grateful for, that happened to be able to help our customers in Roseville that were affected by COVID-19. Moving on to new state laws and resolutions, one of the resolutions that we supported through our trade associations designated the first week of October as Public Power Week. This is something we generally celebrate in the public power community annually, but this really honors public power utilities and their customer owners, policymakers, and employees, and highlighted this process through the legislative process about the beneficial accomplishments and contributions of the public power community. And as I mentioned, it was co-sponsored by our trade associations, NCPA and CMUA. Another bill that I wanted to bring to your attention that did pass the legislature this year is AB 525, which is on offshore wind generation. And this bill really speaks to, by summer of next year, the California Energy Commission establishing offshore wind planning goals for 2030 and 2045. And they will be submitting a strategic plan to the legislature by June 30th of 2023. We were really watching this bill to ensure that there wasn't a statewide mandatory procurement obligation for offshore wind that we'd all have to share a cost in. And so that actually didn't come to pass in this bill. But it's something that we'll continue to monitor at the regulatory agency level, especially as the offshore wind process is kind of getting a lot of attention at the federal level as well as in California. AB 758 was another bill that passed this year and was sponsored by CMUA, and it allows POUs, to publicly owned utilities, to issue rate reduction bonds for utility projects through December 31st of 2036. And rate reduction bonds are really a tool for publicly owned utilities to make investments at a lower interest rate. So this is just another tool in the toolbox that we can have potentially available to us in the future. It was one that was already available to water and wastewater agencies as well as the investor-owned utilities. So I think our folks at CMUA thought it made sense to really extend this to publicly owned utilities as well, to have lower financing options for projects. On to one of the bills that we were tracking that was actually vetoed by the governor, and that was SB 556, which dealt with streetlight poles, traffic signals, and small wireless facility attachments. And we opposed this bill unless it was amended through our trade association. We worked on a working group with them to kind of bring up some issues that local governments had with this proposal. And this bill really had a lot of similarities with the existing Federal Communications Commission order regarding pole attachments, but it had accelerated shot clocks and other provisions that were kind of more onerous that they would have mandated into state law. So that was really what our concerns were with the bill. And we sought amendments to better align SB 556 with the existing FCC order. Unfortunately, the amendments that we provided through our trade association were not adopted. But fortunately, the governor actually vetoed this bill, and in his veto message, he indicated that it put a large burden on the publicly owned utility community as well as local governments. So we thought that was a really positive move and a success for local governments at this time.
Yeah.
And then moving on to a couple two-year bills. And two-year bills are really bills that kind of didn't make it through the process this year, but could come back in the second year of the session next year, maybe in a different form. So one of the ones that we did engage in early on this year was AB 433. And this would have required us to set up voluntary contributions on utility bills to aid wildfire mitigation. And we would have to remit the contributions to a fund in the state treasury on a monthly basis. And really, our concern was that this placed a lot of administrative responsibility on us without any commensurate funding, and there was no requirement that the funds would return to our jurisdiction where they were collected. So we thought it was a very obviously worthy cause, but we voiced these concerns to the author's office, meeting with them earlier in this year, and they were very receptive to our concerns, and the bill was ultimately held. So that was another positive outcome. And then finally, SB 396 by Senator Dawley deals with electric transmission or distribution lines and clearance notices. And so this bill would require the state to develop a standardized noticing content for electrical line clearances. And it would also require that the timber would remain on site unless the landowner requests removal. And if they do, then the removal would be at no cost to the landowner. We have a really good existing process of communicating with our customers here locally in Roseville, and so we were concerned that this would change that process and make it so that we would obviously have to use standardizing notices developed by the state. So we are concerned that this process could be potentially disruptive and costly to our existing processes. And luckily, this bill, because of a lot of the concerns that people voiced late in the session, was held and is going to be made into a two-year bill. So we'll have an additional opportunity in this coming year to kind of hopefully advocate for our concerns again on this bill. And that's a small snippet of the many bills that we were tracking this year, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
So questions on
I
this
have a quick
side?
question on the arrearage. That's all accounts, right? Not just commercial or residential and/or?
So it applies to residential and commercial accounts, and there's an order of priority of how that's applied. There's basically 4 different buckets, starting with residential first. So as I mentioned, there's probably not enough funding to go around for all the arrearages statewide. In that case, we will have to apply the funding based on those priority levels, with residential active customers being the first group that will be receiving benefits. After that, there's inactive customers and then commercial customers. So you could have a scenario where you would potentially use up all of the funding for residential customers before you got to the commercial customer bucket.
Right. And then just my own curiosity, what percentage, that 1.37 million roughly, is of the total revenue? It's a fairly small amount?
Yeah, it's just under 1%.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any?
Who applies for the COVID relief program? Is it the city or the customer?
So really, the utility is applying on behalf of the customer, and so there's a lot of implementation that's going on right now that we're dealing with at the utility, and the goal is to really make this easy for the customer so that the credits will show up on their bill without them having to really go through any kind of difficult application process.
Any other questions on this side? I see a question. Yes, go ahead.
The DWR generators, did they run?
No, they're not. They were running to get tested before, as we brought them up for commercial operation. But as they sit here, we haven't run them at the discretion of, or at the direction of the ISO for any grid emergencies at this point.
I have a question. Are those generators, are they boilers or are they turbines? What?
Turbines.
Turbines. Okay.
Turbines, yeah. Gas-fired turbines.
Right.
Anything else? Yes.
One more question for Amber on the customer program for paying delinquent bills. I'm also hearing a lot of commercials on the radio for everything from rent to utility bills. Is that a different program that the customer reaches out to this website and gets funding somehow?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different funding options, I guess, going through the system right now. One is the HEAP program, the Home Energy Assistance Program. There's also the rental assistant programs. I would classify these as all kinds of different buckets of funding, and I think you could probably qualify for more than one.
Gotcha.
Any other questions? Is there anyone from the public who'd like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Seeing no public comment. Thank you so much, Amber.
Thank you.
I'd like to move to the next item, which is the environmental utilities monthly update. I'll give you a minute to shift around. This presentation is going to be made by Sean Bigley, the Utilities Assistant Director, Environmental Utilities. So thank you.
Thank you. And I do have a presentation, PowerPoint. We can get that up.
See it?
Thank you. All right. Well, good evening. Sean Bigley, Assistant EU Director. And I appreciate the time tonight, Chair Webb and members of the PUC, just to give you a quick update in terms of environmental utilities. And I thought it'd be appropriate, given the storm event this weekend, to give you a little bit of an update on kind of where we stand, as well as some other general updates. And so this first slide, what this is basically the 8-station index. This is the Northern Sierra Precipitation Index. And it's kind of hard to see, but you can see on the very left there, there's a little box that says current, and it says 11.7 inches relative to other sort of water gear types. And so as you can see in this chart, the event that we experienced was very significant. Of course, if you're watching the news, there's a lot of discussion about sort of a lot of different records being broken in this case. And so a very, very sizable storm, a very productive storm, and certainly given the circumstances related to the current drought, it was very well received by many folks, including myself and my team, with respect to the drought. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of show that for just sort of relative comparison in terms of that particular event. So next slide, please. All right, so this is actually similar data. It just kind of puts it in the context of what the current event yielded, and those purple bars are actually the typical average yield that you get for each month. And so, as you can see, we broke the October record pretty sizably. With respect to, sort of future months, we'll definitely need to kind of see how that plays out, but definitely was a sizable enough storm where put us in a pretty good stance, at least to start off the water year. So very, very happy with those results. All right, next slide, please. All right, so to put it in context, this is actually the diagram that kind of shows where Folsom Reservoir is relative to other years. And so what you see here, the very top line is 1982, 1983, a very wet year. The green line is essentially 2014, 2015. The red line is 1976, 1977, which was both 14 and 15 and 76, 77 were drought years. And so as you can see, the way we started off with the reservoir level, kind of starting off the year, we were actually trending below both of those drought years in terms of where we stood, at least the start of the year. And so this graph actually was taken, this is actually taken as of midnight last night. And as you can see, it's a pretty significant jump. Now, right now, the inflow into the reservoir is about 30,000 CFS, cubic feet per second. So it's a pretty sizable flow coming into the reservoir. And the runoff that we're seeing right now is still happening. So we certainly expect to see quite a significant jump. And roughly, in terms of just relative comparison, we were about 221,000 acre feet, I think, right before the storm. And so we're trending about 60, almost 70,000 additional acre feet that came into the reservoir over a course of several days. So very welcome to see that. That certainly gives us a little bit of buffer to work with. So anyways, just to put that all in context. And relative to just general where we're at, what I wanted to do is just give just a sense in terms of what the weather prognosticators think is going to happen over the next several months. This is actually from the National Weather Center. There's two charts here. One's the seasonal temperature outlook, which is helpful to understand because that really kind of dictates what types of storms we could conceivably receive over the next several months. So this graphic actually shows what they are predicting with respect to December, January, February, and kind of what we're looking at with respect to temperature. And so, as you can see, Northern California, it's kind of in a sort of a middle ground where it could either go below or above. So it's a little bit mixed in terms of what that outlook is. Of course, during those months, we'd like to see good rain events that get the upper watershed soaked, and having subsequent snow events is quite helpful. That actually lends to better runoff conditions in the spring. So with that, that's the temperature outlook. I'm going to move on to the next slide, please. All right, so this is the precipitation outlook. And so essentially what we have going on right now in the Pacific Ocean is we have a La Nina event basically set up in the Pacific Ocean. If you follow those types of events, typically what we tend to see is in the Pacific Northwest, you'll see above precipitation, generally speaking. This is sort of generalizing these events. You'll see here in Northern California, essentially it notes equal chances, so it could be either slightly dry or it could be a more wet season. It's really hard to say. About a week ago, I actually pulled this chart and it actually showed the equal chances a little further south into our area. But as you can see right here, they're predicting a little bit drier tendency with respect to that prediction. Now, of course, we all know how it goes with weather predictions, and so it's really kind of what the science can best predict, and predictions are predictions. So, but that being said, it gives us a sense of what we could anticipate in the coming months. Next slide, please. And then one thing before I get into this slide, I just wanted to note So I was our Brian Buchanan, who is within our wastewater utility, he wanted to note that the event was actually so sizable that they actually saw extreme inflow into the wastewater treatment plants. You didn't have enough time to actually put together the data for tonight's presentation, but I think he intends to bring that to show you kind of how sizable the storm was and really how it affected the utilities. And I think it's worth noting that all our folks in the utilities work really hard just to make sure that utilities stay on or reliable, et cetera. And I know within the wastewater group, they worked really hard in terms of managing those extreme flows. And in this case, they had no spill events. They were able to properly treat and contain those extreme flows. But I think it goes to show how dedicated our utility personnel are in terms of making sure our utilities are running appropriately and within all the safeguards and the regulations. So the next thing up, if we can go back to the previous slide, sorry. Nope, there we go. All right, so just wanted to note, we did have our 50th anniversary of the Barton Road Water Treatment Plant. That treatment plant was built, or actually was commissioned August of 1971. So we thought it was appropriate to note the events. We actually have a pretty good display, actually. If you ever visit us at the Corporation Yard, we have a display of some of the historical information, historical sort of artifacts, if you will, relative to how big of a deal that was back in the 1960s and 70s, where really the city made a pretty substantial decision in terms of engaging the Bureau of Reclamation, really trying to not only work through sort of water rights petitions that were competing, but eventually getting a 40-year long-term water service contract, and essentially precipitated the city needing to make that investment in terms of the Central Valley project and becoming a CVP contractor, but also ultimately having to build the Barton Road Water Treatment Plant. So 1971 was a big year for Roseville. That's when they connected into the system and were able to treat water from the CVP. And I think it obviously provided a lot of different benefits for the city over many years in terms of its development, in terms of its economy, as well as developing into a pretty nice community to live, play, and work. So anyways, so these are just photos here, just a couple of snippets from newspapers in the past in terms of that history. And then just the upper right is the current water treatment plant, what it looks like and how it's located next to Folsom Reservoir for obvious reasons. And we did a nice little drone photo at the end of the ceremony with all the folks that participated. So it was a nice event. We had beautiful weather, and it was just a really nice historical point in time to note and celebrate. So anyways, next slide, please. All right, just really quick, a couple more updates, and I'll finish up here. I just wanted to note that last week, the governor issued another drought proclamation. What it essentially does is there's several provisions that we're currently looking at from a staff level in terms of impacts to city operations in the community. What this essentially does is the proclamation allows the State Water Resources Control Board to take regulatory action to put those in place. We haven't seen that agendized yet, but certainly we're paying attention to that item, and we will definitely provide updates in terms of what that impact is in the future. And just really kind of closely looking at not only operational updates for our operation, but also how it will potentially impact the community at large with respect to the drought. So, all right, so next slide. So with that, I will end and ask if you all have any questions for me.
Questions on this side? Over here? No?
No questions.
I'd like to make a comment. I had a chance to go to the 50th anniversary, and very well done. And it's lovely to live in a place where we don't worry about water at all. Well done.
Great, thank you.
Is there anyone from the public who'd like to come forward and address the commission at this time? Seeing no public comment, I would like to thank you, Sean, for your presentation. And thanks to the staff and everyone who makes all of this possible.
Great, thank you. I'll pass that along. Thank you.
I'd like to move on to the next agenda item. This is the Environmental Utilities Legislative and Regulatory Update. And this is going to be done by our Utility Government Relations Supervisor, Noel Maddock, giving us a year-end review of all the priority energy-related legislation and regulatory activities that our city was addressing this year.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission. Noel Maddock with Environmental Utilities. It's really nice to be back before you. I think it's been over a year since we've been able to come and do a presentation, so it's been really nice to be here. Tonight I'm going to go over some legislative items as well as regulatory items that we've been actively engaged in. Just for reference, EU, the 3 different utilities under, we tracked over 250 bills this year in the state legislature. So that just gives you kind of a little bit of a scope of what we were working on. I'm excited because all of the bills that I'm bringing to you tonight that are new laws are ones that we actually supported. So that was a great return on our time and investment, and we think these are all going to be good for our customers. The first measure is AB 32. And what this bill does is it overrides recently adopted regulations requiring treated wood waste to be disposed as hazardous waste. Roseville supported this measure because it will allow our residents and businesses to continue to dispose of treated wood waste, which is commonly used for fencing, arbors, decks, those sorts of things. They'll be able to dispose of them as they've been doing for over a decade. Without this, they would have been subject to costly hazardous waste rules where there was transportation requirements, manifestos, and there's only one hazardous waste facility in California, and otherwise it would had to have been trucked out of state. So we thought this was a great win for our community. The next measure is AB 818. This measure was sponsored by our state association, the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. Annually, wastewater agencies spend over $50 million to deal with the impacts of disposable wipes that are flushed into the collection systems. After 3 years of this hard legislative work by CASA, they were able to pass the strongest do not flush wipes legislation and education requirements in the country. AB 8 will require certain pre-moistened, non-woven disposable wipes to be labeled clearly and conspicuously with the phrase, do not flush. Roseville supported this measure, as well as we've even been doing social media education to help reduce the improper flushing of these wipes already. The next measure is SB 372, which establishes the medium and heavy-duty zero-emission fleet vehicle purchasing assistance program to provide new financing tools and non-financial tools to support local governments like Roseville to transition their fleets to zero emissions. The development of these technical tools and financial supports has never been greater in need, especially since the governor signed Executive Order N7920, which calls for 100% of in-state medium and heavy-duty vehicle sales to be zero emission by 2045. And then after that, the California Air Resources Board proposed Clean Fleets regulation is pushing that timeline up to 2026. So this bill actually has the potential of benefiting our customers through having financial supports as we transition our fleets. And I'm going to go into a little bit more on the Clean Fleets rule regulations at the end of this when I go over the regulations. The next measure is SB 472, which will provide cities and counties the ability to increase fines and penalties for violations of water theft ordinances. This measure was actually sponsored by the Oak Grove Water District and was supported by the regional Water Authority, the Association of California Water Agencies, the California Municipal Utilities Association, all of which we are members of. This bill will allow Roseville to increase fines and penalty amounts to further deter people from illegally connecting to our water system and potentially introducing contaminants into the water. This has the potential to help prevent revenue loss, as well as it could help Roseville meet our state-mandated conservation goals and help us to avoid fines in the future. The next measure we actually did support, but the governor ended up vetoing. So Roseville supported SB 244 through the California Product Stewardship Council, of which we are a member of. We believe this bill would have helped Roseville to provide a safe work environment for our employees and a path forward for the proper disposal and handling of lithium-ion batteries. Specifically, SB 244 would have required CalRecycle to create a guidance document promoting the proper disposal of the lithium-ion batteries, as well as require the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection to develop a model protocol for lithium-ion batteries for their fire detection, handling, and suppression for the solid waste industry. Roseville Waste Services has experienced some truck fires due to those lithium-ion batteries, so this is something that we were keenly aware of and want to make sure that we're providing a safe work environment for our staff. The next section is two-year bills. These are measures that made it most of the way through the process, but at the end of session, they were held over. We are anticipating each of these measures coming back next year. SB 222 proposes to establish a statewide water rate assistance program. Currently, the funding mechanism is undefined. It is to be administered by the Community Services Development Department, or CSD, in consultation with the State Water Resources Control Board, and it would help to provide water affordability assistance for both drinking water and wastewater services to the low-income ratepayers. I'm going to touch a little bit and draw a commonality between one of the programs that was passed this year for the low-income household payment program. So towards the end of session, our statewide trade associations received amendments that they were seeking, and they moved to a watch position. Roseville joined several other entities in taking a support if amended position and requested some additional clarifying amendments that we felt made the bill better and easier for us to implement. Our request was granted, and the city of Roseville would have moved to a full support position, but the governor stepped in the last hours of session, and he actually asked them to hold it so he can work on some amendments going into next year. So we do anticipate this coming back. We're hoping and anticipating that he will be putting it into the budget and hopefully providing funding for the program. So we're going to be holding off our full support until we see what is actually being proposed by the governor. And if it is detrimental to our customers, then we would absolutely be changing our position. But we're hoping to be able to go in with the full support this next year. The next measure is AB 1086. And this bill would require the California Natural Resources Agency to prepare a report that provides an implementation strategy that identifies measures needed to achieve the state's various organic waste, climate change, and air quality mandates, goals, and targets. This is important for Roseville as we have embarked on a project to convert our wastewater sludge as well as our organic waste to renewable natural gas to fuel our refuse fleet. As we engage in the regulatory agencies, they are only looking at their piece of the puzzle rather than taking a comprehensive look. And we are seeing lots of conflicts between the regulations that are coming out. So we believe that this data-driven report is going to help to reduce those conflicts amongst all of the state policies that are being implemented. And it will be another tool that we can go in as we're talking to the various board members of the state agencies to advocate on behalf of our customers. The last measure is AB 1110, which will help entities like Roseville to gain access to programs and incentives that are reduce costs for the clean vehicles. One, because it's going to establish a master services agreement. That's the reason why we really were focused on this measure. Those master service agreements are built to help smaller agencies like Roseville to help convert and get better prices when they're going in to purchase vehicles. And with that, we'll move on to regulations. The first regulation is the clean fleets. You've already heard me talk about several bills that were pertaining to financial incentives and things like that for this. In June of 2020, the State Air Resources Board passed the Clean Trucks regulation, and it has two major components. One is a sales mandate, and one was a one-time reporting requirement for large entities and public fleets. We did have to participate in that and provided the state with information on our fleet. Then on September 23rd of 2020, the governor signed Executive Order N7920, which called for the elimination of new internal combustion passenger vehicles sold in California by 2035, and 100% of medium and heavy-duty vehicles in the state to be zero emission by 2045. So in March of this year, the California Air Resources Board held a workshop on their draft Clean Fleets regulation. In that, the public fleets would be required beginning in 2023 to convert. So moved up from the 2045 to 2035. Now we're at 2023. So 2 years from now, that 50% of our replacement vehicles would have to be zero emission vehicles. And then beginning in 2026, 100% of our replacements would have to be zero emission vehicles. So that would be 2027 or newer models. Plug-in hybrids are currently being given count as a zero emission vehicle until 2035. And then they also have various new reporting requirements for our fleets. Obviously, we have many concerns on the impacts that this is going to have across the board for the city as well as within EU alone. And we're working with Roseville's fleet manager, as well as we're participating in several association work groups that are working on this. And we all are also working with our advocates specifically to address the issue of the turning our fuel into our waste into renewable fuels to fuel our refuse fleet. So that is the Advanced Clean Fleet Regulations. The next one was a great outcome, and that is the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program. This is a little bit different than the CAP program that Amber discussed. This one is based on income for our customers, and it is a program where our customers would be applying for. It is modeled after the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, LIHEAP. And so basically, it would help customers that are at 60% or below of the median income level. And they would be able to apply to a local service provider. They're already in place. They already service the LIHEAP program. So they would go in, they would be able to apply. They could earn up to $1,000 to go towards their arrearages. As Amber talked about, there's a date specific for the CAP program, which was March 4th of 2020 to June 15th of 2021. This program does not have that same date parameters, so people can apply for arrearages that occurred before that March 4th date, as well as the funding is going to be available until 2023 or until expended. So individuals will be able to access this funding after the deadline for the arrearages program, specifically for the COVID period. The next one is the California Water and Wastewater Arrearages Payment Program. This is a little bit like the CAP program. This one is going to the State Water Resources Control Board versus the Community Services District. And before I move on, the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program is much like what we were talking about in SB 222. So that's where the correlation is. And so what we're hoping is the governor pulled it so then the programs now will be established and so then he can fund it. So now I'll move on, sorry. And you can ask me questions afterwards on that one. So the Water and Wastewater Arrearages Program received $985 million in the state budget, and it is going to the State Water Resources Control Board, and it does apply to that March 4th to the June 15th, 2021 timeframe. And the state legislature actually put a little bit more parameters on this program. So the State Water Board had to pass guidelines for the program by September or in September, which they met that deadline. Another difference is the state provided a 3% administrative fee on top of, so each of the agencies could receive that funding for their administrative costs. They also put wastewater as a second tier. What that means is water would be funded first, and if there was any money left over from that pot of funding, then they would move on to the wastewater agencies. It was broken down into several different phases. The first phase was the survey phase, which Roseville participated in. And when we submitted our survey response, we had 522 residential customers that were behind on their water bill. 40 of them were in excess of $600, and the total we were seeking is over $130,000 to help bring our customers to being whole. That $600 is a key point because the state is saying that if a customer receives over $599, then it would be a taxable item. So Roseville is currently working along with our state associations to get guidance from the IRS saying that this is like all of the other COVID relief funding and that it is not taxable. And on the commercial side, because both residential and commercial customers are eligible for this funding, we had 5 that were in excess of $600, and the total we were seeking to help those customers was almost $20,000. The State Water Board has until January 31st to expend those funds, and one of the reasons that we see all of these arrearages is there was a moratorium on shutoffs. So the moratorium on water shutoffs was actually extended to December 31st. during that survey process, what the State Water Board learned was there was enough funding that all of the arrearages that were being claimed by the water agencies was going to be fully funded. So wastewater is going to be eligible. However, they're saying they're not going to start that process until February of 2022. So our water customers are going to see relief first, and then whatever's left over for the wastewater customers, hopefully there'll be enough to go around and satisfy the needs of all of the state. And then we would be able to get those. When we were looking at the data, we wanted to see where our wastewater customers were as compared to our water customers. And at the time we pulled that information, we had 466 customers that were behind on their bills. 23 were in excess of $600, and the total we would be seeking is almost $113,000 to help them. That is all I have. If you have any questions.
On this side?
Yeah.
Okay, please.
So
Let me go.
I'll jump to the wastewater thing in a moment. So I'm not bragging. I have 8 grandchildren, so I know about baby wipes. But some baby wipes are clearly labeled "Do Not Flush." But there's one brand that has a picture of a plumber on it and says "Plumber Approved," as if implying, or as if it's okay to. So how do we, regulate this? I mean, or how does the state legislation propose to regulate this?
So there's only a couple of brands that actually test out where they actually dissolve. And so basically what they're going to be doing is, if they're not one of those products, it's going to have to be visible on all of them that they are do not flush.
Okay.
So a lot of them will imply that it's okay. And that's where the real problem is. There was nothing to regulate that.
Lithium-ion batteries, are we talking just about those in vehicles? Or because a lot of my grandkids' toys have these lithium batteries in them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, and then I'm always like, oh, God, what do I do?
Yes,
Okay.
it addresses the embedded lithium-ion batteries and all of your, I was going to hold up my cell phone, I didn't bring it with me up here. It's in your cell phone, it's in all of the toys, it's the loose ones, everything, yeah.
Okay.
So if they get loose, they have a tendency, or they have the ability to hit another metal object, and what they do is spark. And then
Right, yeah.
that's what causes the fires.
But the government vetoed that bill?
He did.
I wonder why. I wonder what the rationale.
It was due to costs, and he didn't feel as though it was going to resolve the problem.
Yeah, that's
And then on the low
Interesting.
income and the arrears, I think they kind of go hand in hand, but I'm not exactly sure. So, in Roseville, we get those little things in the mail that say use too much or use too little or using the same as your neighbor. And if you want to have an audit done, we're happy to come out and, check to see if you have leaking pipes. So does the legislation contain anything for the users in those categories that would either require or suggest audits of usage, or is it just entirely tied to income?
So these programs were specifically developed to deal with the arrearages due to COVID,
Okay,
not just in general.
okay.
So the water and wastewater arrearages payment program, that one is just specifically for arrearages that occurred between March 4th and 2015 and June 15th of 20.
Okay, so just a window.
Thank you. That was way off. June 15th of 2021.
Gotcha.
And then the LIWAP program, that one is specifically for the income. It's an income-based program, and that will cover from anything before and then anything after to 2023.
I've got one more. Water theft. I mean, I lived in a rural county, so I know about water theft. How big is water theft in our service area?
I can't speak to the scope of it. Sean looks like he's getting ready to lean forward, but I do know that we have had people put illegal hoses, attach hoses to the fire hydrants illegally, and then
God.
I'll let Sean go ahead and.
Yeah, so we had definitely experience with this in 14-15 with water theft. And oftentimes you'll see water theft on a larger scale when you have commercial vendors that actually need to use water for, sidewalks or other types of activities. So you'll typically see that where they'll just illegally hook up to a hydrant, fill up their tank, and take off. So it happens. And the thing I think is important here is that's at the cost of our rate-paying customers, our utility customers, and so certainly we want to make sure that that's not happening. In addition, we are going to be pretty closely regulated in terms of water loss within our system. That's actually a regulatory effort underway right now by the State Water Board. So it's important to be able to kind of control, to the extent possible, water theft in our system. And then in addition, as Noel stated, there is a possibility of cross-contamination as well, which we're also regulated for. So we definitely have a stake in ensuring that doesn't happen.
Any other questions over here?
You had mentioned that would be looking into the use of maybe, I want to say incineration, but that's what it amounts to burn waste products, wood, waste, whatever, to generate, methane gas.
So, yes.
That's a mess.
So the wastewater utility is already in construction on another digester.
Yep.
And so they will already be turning wastewater sludge, and they have the ability to accept the food wastes that are coming from our residential and commercial that we're now required to remove from the waste stream per regulations. So that is going to end up fueling our refuse fleet. So it's kind of creating a closed loop system within Roseville. We're creating the waste, but then using it for a beneficial use.
With upcoming regulations in the future, we're not going to be able to use gas. I mean, no gas, which means our massive power plant in Roseville, which is really impressive, that's going to be a major problem for Roseville.
Yes.
What do they do?
Yes. And we're trying to impart on the regulators that are trying to completely eliminate the use of gas.
Yep.
We have to be able to do something with these waste streams, and this is actually a beneficial use and helps to achieve part of their goals of removing short-lived climate pollutants from the air quicker than trying to electrify the entire system.
So I had a question. When does the labeling on the non-woven wipes, when does that go into effect?
Of course you would ask that, and I didn't put it down. Can I get back to you on that?
Absolutely. Yeah, because I'm like, that's been one of my, it theoretically, yes, it will go down, but then where does it go?
Yes, I remember it was a couple of years out, but I don't want to give you a specific date and then be wrong.
All right, and questions on this side? Yeah, start there.
So just a general question, doesn't really probably relate to the presentation so much. So if a resident wants to throw batteries into the trash, is that acceptable, or should they be taking them somewhere else? Will that get separated out at the MRF?
So we do have a program where we do accept batteries separately. And he keeps pulling it down. But yes, they can put their batteries into a baggie, make sure that you tape the ends off first before transporting them, and then we will accept those.
And that's optional, I guess. It's not mandatory yet, or what may not be at all.
Well, you're not supposed to be throwing any batteries into the waste stream, so.
You shouldn't be. But I'm sure everybody does.
I'm sure there are people, but
On
yeah.
the website, I was confused. But if I put them in a Ziploc bag and tape it with duct tape, I can put it into the trash?
No.
No,
You would
that's
have to take it to a,
To the drop-off place?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
yes, yes.
I'm just going to clarify real quick that for the baby wipes, it's any baby wipes manufactured on or after July 1, 2022 have to be labeled with the do not flush language. So there you go.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's any wipe, but not just babies, yeah, I'm sure.
There's a definition
Oh, okay.
of the
Call it pre-moistened.
pre-moistened,
Non-woven.
non-woven disposable wipe.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So I assume you're going to buy a few extra heavy-duty vehicles in '22, huh? And, you know, I think that they've got a system set up that is at some point has in my opinion, a high probability of failure. And hopefully Roseville's not on the bleeding edge of that. So finds a way to be in compliant with the law fully, but sort of to the back of the pack, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, we're definitely being quite strategic in terms of how we look at our current fleet, what our projected purchases look like, and ensuring that we meet the law. But yeah, certainly being very prudent about how we approach that for sure.
So there was a governor's declaration. This is a little off topic. I apologize, but he included in one of these sweeping declarations that he wanted to eliminate gas-powered chainsaws, and so PCWA and a bunch of partners are up there trying to thin 10,000 acres of heavy forest, which you can't do with an electric chainsaw. I mean, it's going to put thinning forests in California completely out of business. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I just want to make the point that. Thank you.
Further questions or comments for Noel? Is there anyone from the public who'd like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Not hearing any public comment. I want to thank you very much for your update, Noel. It's 250 bills. Well done.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda is board member and commissioner or staff reports. Are there any reports from staff? Are there any additional questions or comments from the commission? Start on this side. Over here. Are there any items that you would like to suggest for future meetings? Not hearing any of those. May I have an motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Yes, and can I have a second? Yes. Second. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing no opposition, we are adjourned.